Now, when we looked at the dialogue, I want you to drop your eyes into chapter 4 for a minute. When we looked at the dialogue, we started off by asking about Eliphaz, and we asked the question, what is the dialogue of Eliphaz? What is his line of thinking? And just look at 4:1 for a minute and see if I can. I'm not going to do a lot with these guys. I got to get to 38 because that's where we're supposed to be. But 4:1, then Eliphaz the Temanite answered, if one ventures a word with you, will you become impatient? He starts off by saying, excuse me, am I allowed to talk now? And everybody in the audience says, oh, yea, verily, because they're waiting for drama, and drama only happens when people stand up and break into a soliloquy, you know. So he says, but who can refrain from speaking? I'm looking at this, and I'm your friend, and I got to say something. So verse 3, behold, you have admonished many, and you have strengthened weak hands. He says, in your past, Job, you have been somebody who corrected people as well as encouraged people. Now, what's he saying? He's trying to make a point. You've been a public figure. You've been out there telling other people where they're wrong, so now you need to take your medicine like a man. The world does not accept someone giving maxims and then not living them. The world can stomach a lot of things, but a hypocrite is not one of them. So he says, you don't want to be a hypocrite, so since you've been a guy who's been giving instructions and encouragement, I have something to say to you. Your words have helped the tottering to stand, and you have strengthened feeble knees. He said, you taught others, now it's your turn to get taught. That's where he's going. Now it has come to you, and you are impatient. Now stop there for a second. The guy lost his kids. The guy lost his camels. The guy lost his flocks. The guy lost his fields. The guy lost virtually everything that was calculated for his wealth. So his past accumulated wealth was gone, and his children and his future were gone. And he's looking at all this, and this guy looks at him from the cheap seats, not having lost all that, and says, you seem to me to be impatient. Well, you think? I mean, come on. What do you have to lose to start going, this is not good? But circle the word impatient. Because remember, we told you 4 times the enemy shows up in the Hebrew scriptures. And when he shows up to Eve and says, Eve, you shall not surely die, he's trying to make her ignorant, according to Warren Wiersbe. He's trying to make her ignorant of God's will. But when he shows up to Job, he's trying to make Job impatient of God's will. Make a note in your Bible or in your heart or in your life or in your mind that one of the things that happens when the enemy is allowed to bring sickness into our life, the game is played to make you impatient with the will of God. That's its purpose. And so here it is. You are impatient, it touches you, and you are dismayed. The dismayed word is a word that is, you are amazed, or it has another dimension to it. You are taken off course. You don't understand what happens. How many of us can be cruising along in our life and something really hard happens and we're going, wait a minute, God, if you're good and I'm in your will, why is this happening? I'm off course now. Now look at the word dismayed and make a note in your life that the enemy is not only trying to make you impatient with the will of God, he's trying to make you question whether God's track for your life makes sense. And when it doesn't make sense to you, somehow he's implying that therefore it's wrong. But that presupposes that we can know how it's supposed to go and what it means. What about this? How about a third option? No, it doesn't make any sense to me and it's perfect for me. Your car breaks down on a Tuesday afternoon. You're sitting by the side of the road. You're a little bit uneasy. You don't know what you're doing there. You're late for your class. You're upset with the Lord. You're upset with your car. You're upset with the car maker who's in Japan who you don't even know. You're upset with life. Up comes a guy in an old truck. Now you're scared. He jumps out and it turns out about a year later you marry him. See, you don't know the moment in your life that God is going to turn the corner with something. You have no idea. You don't have in your daytimer, today I'm going to meet the love of my life. That doesn't happen. So what you have is the dismay of, is God in control? Does he know what he's doing? Now, here's the thing. Look at verse 6. Is not your fear of God your confidence and the integrity of your ways your hope? The first half of the sentence really sounds good. The second half is completely wrong. Is not your fear of God your confidence? I want you to know something. You're going to make decisions based on a fear of life or a fear of the Lord. If you fear the Lord, that means you will see Him as the largest prevailing person in your life, and you will desire to please Him, and you will make a good decision. If you fear life, you will take your eyes off of Him, and something will become larger than Him, and you will make a bad decision. That's the way it works. Now, what's wrong with the second half of the sentence?
He's basically saying that, you do good, you get good.
You do good, you get good. Great. The key to understanding Eliphaz and what he's going off on is he believes what baby Christians believe. I do good so I can get good. This was basically Mrs. Osteen's comment. You worship for yourself. It went viral on the net, but what she was trying to say was baby Christian talk. Do good so you can get good. Give so it can be multiplied and you get back. That's not about love for God, that's about love for self. That's nothing more than self-exaltation, and it sounds Christian, but it's not. What he just said is wrong. The integrity of your ways is not your hope. Your hope is not in whether you perform well. Here's the problem with that. What about when I don't? So the reality is my hope is in the Lord, not in my performance. But Eliphaz's hope was in his performance. This is where he's going to go off. And then it says, remember now, whoever perished being innocent. Stop there. Answer the question. Whoever perished being innocent. Lots of people. Put the word martyr next to it. There were a lot of people who were walking with God that just didn't fit into Eliphaz's understanding of life, because his thing was do good, get good. But then it says, or where were the upright destroyed? Lots of places, Eliphaz, and if you're thinking you don't know, here's your problem. The phrase that I asked you to underline next time, in the next verse, in verse 8, last time, was this: according to what I have seen. His problem is he's going to answer things from his own experience. Let me tell you how this really works in Christianity. You get sick. You go to a doctor. You pay that doctor an inordinate amount of money. That doctor gives you advice. You come back, you tell your prayer group, and 5 of them give you free medical advice to trump your doctor. Well, yeah, they don't really know what they're talking about. And with my lack of medical school, let me roll out what I really know about this. That's how it really works. Am I being too hard? A couple of months ago, I went to a charismatic convention and admitted from the platform I had a headache. You should have seen what happened in the room. I was having demons cast out of me. I just needed aspirin, is all I was looking for. But we have a lot of different ways in Christendom that we handle things, and some people see the devil as part of everything that's wrong with you. You might be shaky today because you didn't eat right. The devil's not even working up a sweat. You're doing a great job ruining your body just by yourself. Here's what he says. According to what I've seen, those who plow iniquity and those who sow trouble harvest it. In verse 8, he says, my life verse, says Eliphaz, is do good, get good, do evil, get evil. That's the way the world works. And that's fine because he really believes it. But just remember this. Just because everybody in the room believes it doesn't mean it's true. It might mean you need more friends. And the problem with Eliphaz is that he sees it the way he sees it. So he says in verse 9, by the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they come to an end. So he sees life in the physical world as the reward, and death in the physical world as judgment. Now here's the problem with that. You'll go to a funeral. 20-something dies. And you'll hear people go, oh, so young, robbed of life. If they're a believer, they're not robbed of a thing. They're with Jesus. Frankly, your life stinks compared to theirs. They're in heaven, you're in Sebring. Hello? So we treat it with the Eliphaz idea that somehow, if you don't get more time on earth, you really missed out. That's not true. You have exactly the number of minutes Jesus prescribed for your life. Now, you can blow what you do with them, because life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you want, but only spend it once. At the same time, don't look at the prize as here. Now, right now, if I were 20, I might look at the prize as though it were here. But with each passing year, I look in the mirror and can't wait to lose this body for 2.0. Here's the truth. He's walking around in verse 10, the roaring of the lion and the voice of the fierce lion and the teeth of the young lions are broken. The lion perishes for lack of prey, and the whelps of the lioness are scattered. Now, a word was brought to me stealthily, and my ear received a whisper of it. Amid disquieting thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, dread came upon me and trembling, and made all my bones shake. Then a spirit passed by my face. The hair of my flesh bristled up. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes. There was silence, and then I heard a voice. Can mankind be just before God? Can a man be pure before his Maker? Now, he moved from his first answer. His first answer was experience. What's his second answer being derived from?
Spiritual being told me.
I've had this dream. You're going to meet these people. Yeah, I know what's wrong with you because I had a dream last night. I have these visions. Now, here's the problem. There's absolutely no way to validate what he saw or didn't. You know, I mean, honestly, Dickens said when Ebenezer Scrooge saw his first apparition, there is more of bad potato soup in you than spirit. I don't know. When somebody comes to me and says, I had this dream, I had this vision, I don't know if it's from God. I don't discount that God can do it. He does it all the way through his word. Don't you ever tell God he's not allowed to do stuff. But at the same time, you can't base all of your revelatory understanding on that because you got the word of God, and that's what you check everything against. So he comes out and says, I had a dream, and in this dream, this is what I saw. And the question in his dream was left unanswered. Can a man really be pure? Now, what's the answer to the question? No, you can't be. But by that, he's tagging Job with it. But the dream might have also been about Eliphaz. See, it's easier to point outward than it is to take inward. You're going to go to a Bible camp, you're going to listen to people preach the Bible, and you're going to be sitting there with your shovel going, oh, he needed to hear that. Oh, she needed to hear that. You don't need a shovel, you need a rake. I need to hear this. And the problem is that what happens in our lives is that we get an insight from God, even from Scripture, and we want to run around and tag it on everybody else's life and not internalize it. Can I ask you to do something? The deepest things God shows you, don't throw them out there. Hold them. Allow them to settle in your life. Because very often God's communicating something through his word intimately with you to change you. And you go, but wait a minute, that doesn't really apply to me. Wait for you, because you aren't you yet. You're just getting to be you. And there's going to come a day when you're going to go, I got it now. Now I know why God said that. There were years of my life where I had two lives. When I was your age, I left and went to the Middle East, and I built a life there. But I had a life back in New Jersey. I mean, that's hard to believe to have a life in New Jersey, but I had one. And the point is that they were two lives. And when I came back to the States and met Dottie and went off to Elkhart and then ended up down in Florida, I had these two lives and I couldn't put them together. It was 25 years later that the lives came together. That it makes sense to me why God has me split between a Middle Eastern world and this world. It fits together. What I'm saying is it may take years of your life before all the pieces come together. Don't worry about that. Let the pieces be the pieces. Let them percolate and bug you. But later on, God will bring something out of it. I got to move past this. It's kind of interesting. Verse 18, he says, he puts no trust even in his servants, and against his angels he charges error. You know what? He says everybody's guilty, even angels. By the way, he's wrong. There's plenty of angels that aren't guilty, and you shouldn't be messing with the 2/3 over the 1/3. That's just not fair. He's like being unfair to angels. But let's move on. Verse 19. how much more those who dwell in houses of clay, and what he's talking about is human bodies, whose foundation is the dust, who are crushed before the moth. Between morning and evening, they are broken in pieces. People are temporary. That's what he's saying. He's saying your body is fragile and people are temporary. He's right about that. Unobserved, they perish forever. He's wrong about that. The body perishes, but the person doesn't. Eliphaz doesn't have a proper theology. And it says, is not their tent cord plucked up within them? They die, yet without wisdom. Chapter 5, verse 1 says, call now, is there anyone who will answer you? And to which of the holy ones will you turn? He says, listen, when you remember they didn't divide chapters and verses like they did, that came much later. He says, listen, people die, they're gone. You can yell at them, even if they were godly people. They're not answering you anymore. And he says, look, it seems to me that life's about the here and now and then it's over. You know what he sounds like? A beer commercial. Doesn't get any better than this. Guess what? Yes, it does. He's wrong. But see, when you make your life about the here and now, you make it about the observations of life in the here and now. For every university professor that walks around saying you can only believe that which you can measure in a test tube, they don't believe in love, they don't believe in purpose, they don't believe in all the biggest things in life. That's why they keep them in the science department and don't let them wander over into the literature department, because they don't like poetry because it's about stuff they don't know anything about because you can't measure it. Look at verse 2. Anger slays the foolish man. 5:2. Anger slays the foolish man. Jealousy kills the simple. I have seen foolish taking root, and I cursed his abode immediately. His sons are far from safety. They are even oppressed in the gate. There is no deliverer. He says, look, it's evil men who suffer. If you look at life, it's evil people who suffer. But the problem is there's a philosophy, and it comes out even in Christendom, where people will come and they will tell you things like, well, if you had enough faith, you wouldn't be in this hospital bed. To me, the height of cruelty is to blame the person who's sick with their sickness. If only you could be standing like me. How is that not Pharisaical? How is that not the Pharisee who stood up and said, thank God I'm not as this man over here, the sinner? He says there is no deliverer. In his world, he sees evil as perishing. I wish that was the truth. I wish that bad people really paid the penalty for what they did. But after 53 years of life, here's what I know. Mostly they make a mess and everybody else has to live with it. He never saw a drunk driver. They didn't have a lot of drinking in camels. It just didn't happen that often. Verse 5. His harvest the hungry devour and take to it a place of thorns. The schemer is eager for their wealth. For affliction does not come from the dust. It's interesting. You know what he's really saying? This is an old Middle Eastern proverb that trouble doesn't come from the trees. Trouble doesn't grow on trees. That's what he's trying to say. It doesn't just, they don't have trees, so they talk about dust, okay? They say, trouble doesn't just come up out of the ground. We would say, trouble doesn't just grow on trees, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. For man is born for trouble. He's a real lighthearted guy that you want to invite to your party. As the sparks fly upward, but as for me, I would seek God. I would place my cause before God. In other words, what he's saying is seek God, he gives good to the good. So if he's not giving you good, you're not seeking him. If you seek him, if you just would pray more, these bad things wouldn't happen. You're going to have a believer drop by your house, and you'll have some devastating thing happen, and they'll look at you and blame you because your prayer life isn't good. This is really helpful. You know, gee, I'm sorry you're in a body cast, but you know, if you would have prayed more. It's Eliphaz revisited. This guy's got a lot of stuff that's still in a lot of people, and that's why God gives us the record. Look at verse 12. He frustrates the plotting of the shrewd so that their hands cannot attain success. This guy's actually walking around believing that if you'd pray more, that evil people wouldn't advance. Our government would shut down if that was true. Frankly, I mean, honestly, the economy would shut down if that was true. Wall Street would collapse if that was true. If you could simply pray and all the bad people would get their due, I don't think that's really a good idea right about now. And so he says he captures the wise by their own shrewdness, and the advice of the cunning is quickly thwarted. Notice the word quickly. In his world, God deals in the here and now with judgment. That's his world. Can I give you a Christian perspective? God deals with everything eventually, but not necessarily today. You're going to be only more impatient if you live Eliphaz's advice. If you walk around believing that God owes fixing it now, then every person who goes through difficult circumstances is going to somehow believe that God owes them something right now. He doesn't. He says, do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. He says, stop kicking at God for having taken away your kids. You know, from the cheap seats, that's pretty easy to say. For he inflicts pain, but he gives relief. He wounds, and his hands also heal. From 6 troubles he will deliver you. Even 7 evils will not touch you. In famine he will redeem you from death, and in war from the power of the sword. This guy's going to cruise along and he's going to do great until bad things happen to him. Now here's the thing. You'll often hear me mention that one particular error because in my life I've spent more time with believers who were hindered and hurt by the Eliphaz error, do good, do bad, get bad. I've spent more time with this than any other single issue in Scripture besides salvation. There's an awful lot of Christians who grew up in a time through the 70s, 80s, 90s. You would call them the Dark Ages or Middle Ages, but they grew up a long time ago in olden days. And they heard televangelists tell them that if they did good, they'd get good. Here's the thing. Those guys never show up in Ethiopia. They never show up in Ethiopia and stand there in front of people who didn't take any food for the last 4 days so they could get a bus ticket to come to the meeting. First time you have to speak to that group, you're going to feel stupid. I show up and boy, I'll tell you what, the last thing you want to do is go and speak in Africa. That's the last thing you want to do with a philosophy that says do good, get good. You got to look at their farms and see what they got to work with. What I do know is this. Verse 23 says, you will be in league with the stones of the field, and the beasts of the field will be at peace with you. You will know your tent is secure. Look at verse 27. Here's the phrase I asked you to mark. Behold this, we have investigated it, and so it is. In other words, let's close out Eliphaz's first speech with a simple statement. What I have investigated, what I have experienced, what I know, that's the truth. The only problem is he's wrong. Why? Because our perspective and our investigation is pretty limited. Can we all just agree that we don't have a heart tie to 5 different kinds of world faiths? You've never been to the mosque picnic. You've never been there. So when you look at their worldview and what they treasure, you look at it from your perspective, never having lived in theirs. So if you're going to conclude that you have all truth based on the little window of life through which you are going, what happens next year when you no longer agree with you 19? When you 20 thinks you 19 was dumb, what are you supposed to do with that? Because you can't always be right in your perspective, but always be changing as a person. Something's got to give. Eliphaz doesn't work. So what I want you to do is, I want you to see that in chapters 6 and 7, Job did his best to answer him. I'm not going to pour through it, but I do want you to just read the beginning of it. Job answered, oh, that my grief were actually weighed and laid in balances together with my calamity. I wish you could feel what I'm feeling, is what Job said. I'm sitting here listening to you and you're kind of theorizing about my pain. Do you have any idea how bad this hurts? Verse 3, for then it would be heavier than the sand of the seas, therefore my words have been rash. He says, I know some things I've said were over the edge, but you're not feeling what I'm feeling. I have nothing, guys, I have nothing but respect for people in chronic pain. I get, a paper cut and I'm put off for the day. And I got to tell you, there's people that you're meeting that are walking in and out of here that are spending an hour or two to get ready to show up at a service, and they are in pain the entire time you see them. You're going to conclude people get old and get grumpy. And you're going to miss the point. That when everything that you know of on your body that works hurts, it's just plain hard. I hug people at that door on Sunday morning and say, thank you for taking the effort to do this, because I know it was the single greatest amount of energy they were going to expend this week on doing anything. What does it say about their life that they did it so that they could come and worship with us? Are you not just a little bit moved? So all I'm saying is he's sitting there and he's going, the arrows of the Almighty are within me. Their poison my spirit drinks. He says, I feel like I'm shot at and God shot me. I'm bleeding 1,000 different ways here and everything hurts. Can something tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? What's he trying to say? What's his point? Move the poetry for me for a minute.
You have to take the good with the bad?
Yeah, he says, there's a part of this that just has no taste at all. And I can't quite figure out what everything is for. I just know it hurts like all get out. Now, I want to stop. I'm not going to do more with Eliphaz or with Job's speech because you did this in your class. I really want to get you, I've got to get you through Bildad and Zophar, but we're coming up on a break. So let me ask you this. If you were to summarize Eliphaz's approach to life, what are the big things from what we just went through that you'd pick out? Zoe? He has a Google perspective. We know it when we Google it. I've checked it out. I've Googled it. This is the answer to life. You're running into more people with this, not less. The problem is they happen to be wrong. But they're very efficient, and they've got good phones, if that counts for anything. Let me suggest to you that there are a great many people in life who have decided already what life is about.